Christopher Columbus is one of the most famous explorers in history whose voyages changed the course of world history. His discoveries led to major transformations in the geography, politics, and economy of Europe, the Americas, and the entire world. However, his life, discoveries, and legacy are surrounded not only by historical achievements, but also by numerous scandals, myths, and legends. Early life. Christopher Columbus was born between August 25th and October 31st, 1451, in Genoa, Italy. He came from a middle-class family. His father, Domenico, was a weaver, while his mother, Susanna, belonged to a more noble family. From a young age, Columbus was fascinated by the sea and likely began his seafaring career at the age of 14. Columbus studied at various educational institutions, but, not completing formal education, he became an experienced navigator and maritime expert. He initially worked on trade ships in the Mediterranean and later joined the Portuguese and Spanish fleets. His research and study of maps made him an expert in geography, and it was this knowledge that led him to propose an expedition that he believed could open a new maritime route to India. Searching for a route to India. At the time, it was believed that the Earth was round, but no one knew of a route to India across the Atlantic Ocean, and many thought it was impossible. However, Columbus was confident that it was possible to reach India by sailing westward. He proposed his idea to King John II of Portugal, but was rejected. He then approached the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. After lengthy negotiations and several years of waiting, in 1492, the Spanish monarchs agreed to fund his expedition. First voyage and discovery of America. On October 12, 1492, after several months of sailing, Columbus and his crew reached the shores of what he believed to be part of Asia. In fact, these were islands in the Caribbean, present-day Bahamas, and Columbus made a mistake in his calculations, thinking he had reached India. Columbus continued his exploration, discovering several islands, including Cuba and Haiti. However, despite his discoveries, he never realized that he had encountered a new continent. Over the next several years, Columbus made 3 more voyages, exploring the coasts of Central and South America, but throughout his life, he remained convinced that he had found a western route to Asia. Scandals and controversies. Appeal to the crowns and colonial rule. After his discoveries, Columbus was appointed governor and viceroy of the new territories he had discovered. However, his administration turned out to be unsuccessful. He faced numerous problems, including rebellions among the settlers, harsh treatment of the indigenous people, and poor economic management. His reputation among Spanish authorities suffered significantly due to his harsh methods of governance. In 1500, he was arrested and sent back to Spain in chains, although he was later released, but his power was limited. Relations with indigenous peoples. Columbus is also remembered for his cruel policies toward the indigenous peoples he encountered during his voyages. He and his followers often inflicted violence, slavery, and diseases on the conquered lands, leading to the mass deaths of the native populations. These actions provoked criticism from other European explorers and religious leaders of the time. Conflict with rivals. Columbus not only faced internal problems in his colonies, but also rivals within Spain. After his voyages stopped yielding immediate economic results, his opponents at the royal court began to undermine his position. This led to a conflict with the authorities and the loss of his post as governor. Legends and myths. Columbus is surrounded by many myths and legends that have both supported his fame and added confusion to his true legacy. Columbus didn't discover America. One of the most widespread myths is the claim that Columbus discovered America. However, this statement is not entirely true. There were already indigenous peoples living on these lands, and there were also Vikings, such as Leif Erikson, who arrived in North America long before Columbus. Mistakes in calculations. Columbus made errors in his calculations about the size of the Earth, which led him to incorrect conclusions about the location of Asia. However, he was steadfast in his beliefs and continued to search for proof of his hypothesis, even when his routes didn't match reality. Columbus and India. Columbus was convinced that his voyages had led him to India, and he referred to the indigenous people of the Americas as Indians, which became a symbol of his misconception. He and his crew also brought back items and cultures that were believed to be Asian, but in reality, they were unique to the New World. Legacy. The legacy of Columbus is highly controversial. On one hand, his discoveries led to global changes, which ultimately resulted in the creation of New World economies, cultural exchanges, and globalization. However, his actions also caused immense suffering and destruction for the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Today, debates about Columbus continue, and his figure has become a symbol of both great discoveries and colonial abuses. His legacy largely shapes our view of the collision between the Old and New Worlds and Europe's role in that process. Thus, Christopher Columbus remains an important and multifaceted figure in history, one whose legacy continues to provoke discussion and whose name continues to capture interest and controversy.